much for joining us today on another interesting but informative edition of Enterprise Morning, reaching you from Enterprise Television. I am Henry Igwebike, and we kick off today with our newspapers, and right after that will be our main conversation also for today. Please do well to be part of what we do. Have a say in what we say. You can always find us at enterprisetvnews.com. You may equally like, comment, and follow us on all our social media platforms at Enterprise TV7. We're very so honored to have with us, joining us via Zoom, Hassan Soweto, the National Coordinator, Education Right Campaign ERC. Good morning to you, Mr. Soweto. Hello, good morning to you, Mr. Soweto. Hello, can you hear me, Mr. Soweto? Okay, I think we're having a little bit of a glitch there. Hello, Mr. Soweto, can you hear me? All right, still Enterprise Morning, and we're just kicking off today. Good morning to you, Mr. Soweto. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning, sir. How are you, sir?
Thank you. I'm very fine. Thank you. Thank you so very much for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome, sir.
All right, so let's kickstart today with our newspapers, of course. We have a trendy topic that I think is very important that we talk about it, especially knowing that you are in the educational ecosystem, and I think you might have your 2 cents on this particular matter. We on Monday, June 23rd, that is, we have it, the popular social media activist Martins Vincent Osei, known widely as a very dark man, took his protest to the residence of the Federal Capital Territory FCT Minister Nyesom Wike over the ongoing strike by the primary school teachers that has left pupils out of school for over 90 days. Please, we'll love your take on that particular matter.
Well, thank you very much. I think the first thing to say would be to commend the very dark man, because the way the young man has transitioned from just being a celebrity, a social media celebrity, to using his platform to take up issues that concerns Nigerians, I think is actually very commendable. The fact that he has now moved from just taking up issues of fraud or issues of maybe exploitation of a few people to taking up policy issues, defending the right of workers or other Nigerians who are affected by government policy. I think it's a transition that really is very commendable because of the kind of impact it can have in the collective struggle of the Nigerian people. And this is a lesson, I think, that other social media celebrities should emulate, because they have this huge power that many people don't have. And the fact that, very dark man can use his own platform really, can really be help the struggle of the Nigerian people. I mean, the strike has been on for a long time, and very few people outside of the FCT knew about it. But from what has happened yesterday, it is the entire country, that is aware that such a thing is happening. And that can put enormous pressure, for instance, on the FCT minister to do something about it. But that's a very big embarrassment, that, the FCT minister actually faced yesterday with that protest. It was not just a protest alone. It was a protest with the pupils, sitting down in front of his office, eating in their school uniform, learning the alphabet. That's also, I think, a very dramatic angle, that helps to show that the FCT minister's action in not meeting the demands of the teachers, is denying the younger generation the future, of the country, an opportunity to be in school. I think very dark man actually should be commended.
Very, very true. He should be commended. But my question is, what kind and type of leadership do we think Nyesom Wike is practicing? Just recently, he renovated the International Conference Center with 39 billion naira. Every year, he makes available 10 billion naira for the rent for senators, especially the Senate president and a few others. Do you really think Nyesom Wike is really the man we all see him for? The talk and do, the Mr. Contractor and all of that. Do you think he has got that leadership thing in him, or he's just playing to the gallery? Because what these teachers are asking for is for the minimum wage, 70,000 naira. And it's difficult for the FCT to provide that.
See, I mean, we can't mince words when it comes to the likes of Wike. Wike's position as FCT minister is an error. By virtue of his antecedent politically, by virtue of his personality, by virtue of his temperament, by virtue of everything that a Wike represents, such an individual ought not to be found in any position of responsibility, much less a public office. That is notwithstanding the fact that he had been a former governor or former minister of state. But when you look at all of his antecedents, even in those roles, he was mostly, a bulldog, in those roles over his staff, ranking roughshod over the people. You can see, even after he left Rivers State, his role in the political situation in Rivers State also shows the kind of person he is. But I think that the fact that the likes of Wike continue to find themselves in position of responsibility is actually an indictment on the capitalist political leadership of this country, because it does shows that leadership in Nigeria right now, the standard has completely dropped. Decades ago, when you are talking about leadership at the level of the Nigerian capitalist elite, you'll be talking of statesmen, the likes of Awolowo, statesmen, people who are intellectuals, people who have certain visions and philosophies about the nation building. But over the past 25 or so years of democracy now, we have seen all kinds of characters, crooks of all kinds come to power. It's not just that they are corrupt leaders and all of that. It is that their behaviors and code does not even edify. It's not edifying for a political office. So that even apart from all of the question of the policy implication of not paying teachers the minimum wage, even apart from all of that, even from the point of view of the kind of person that Wike is, I think is an error. But of course, when you then take it to the question of the policy choices he has made, the fact that he will prefer to spend public resources, on those things you have said, instead of providing, support for human capital development by paying minimum wage, to teachers, something which would obviously have a very resonating effect on the quality of teacher and all of that, is another angle to it. And it does show again the kind of, characters that we have in government. So that I think what we should say at this level is that the strike of those teachers has to be supported. In fact, I think with what Very Dark Man has done yesterday, what should be calling for now is a wider solidarity with the FCT teachers, which will involve the NLC as well as the TUC, actually declaring a solidarity strike with the FCT teachers. But Very Dark Man has had to expose the fact that for several days now, weeks, pupils and children in the FCT have been out of school because of Wike's refusal, to pay the minimum wage. What can be done now to consolidate on that publicity, it's for a full-blown solidarity strike, even just for a day, by workers in the entire FCT, led by the NSC and TUC, to back the strike of the teachers. I think that will really send a very clear one to Wike, but not just to Wike, but several other governors around the country who also are failing to pay the minimum wage. But it's not just Wike alone. All across the country today, the minimum wage of 70,000 naira is not being paid in most states of the federation.
Very, very true, Mr. Soweto. But let's take a look at other matters from the Guardian newspaper for this morning. And straight up to EFCC arrest ex-NNPC chief over alleged $7.2 billion fraud. Mr. Soweto, I would love to believe you were very much aware when the NNPC under Mele Kyari brought in legacy media stations and they went to Port Harcourt refinery. They renovated one, so they said, Yes,
Yes.
to tell us and to show us how that the refinery was working. But now it is becoming evident that it was all fraud. It was all criminal activity happening there. I'd love you to speak to me on this particular matter.
See, I mean, that's why some of us are advocating for a socialist revolution as the only way to begin to resolve the problem of this country. Those who think that just going to vote every 4 years to elect people into power can change this country. They are suffering an delusion. Gradual changes is an illusion in this country when it comes, to addressing the crisis that faces. Because, Nigeria is a crime feed. Nigeria is not a country. And some of these cases are just, examples that tells us, that this country is like an animal on the slaughter slab. The port authority, what about the aviation? It's a whole series of crime going on, and particularly when it comes to NNPC. NNPC is not it's an account. It's not under the supervision of anyone. It determines how much of oil revenue that it receives from the oil majors, that it declares into the federation accounts. Is an entity that is shrouded in mystery, in opacity, and this has been the case for decades on end. When it comes to the refineries, since under Obasanjo, billions of dollars have been sunk on several occasions to supposedly, repair the refineries. And usually, just like the scenario you have just described now, is what we hear. They will say it remains 18 months for it to become operational. It remains 2 months. Port Harcourt refinery is now operational. What is going to follow? Then 6 months after, you don't hear anything at all. And it doesn't have any impact on the crude oil, refinery in Nigeria. It is a complete pack of fraud. And this fraud really has, a design. It has an end. It has an end game. It's not just a fraud committed by individuals. Let me be clear to you. Those individuals that they are going after are just the scapegoats, because the system needs to, put forward scapegoat from time to time in order to give the impression, that what is happening is just the mistake or the avarice of one person or the other. Whereas this is a systemic, fraudulent scheme going on, something that has a pattern and something that benefits an entire class of the capitalist elite in this country. And why do I say this? Why do you think that a private refinery of the size and weight of Dangote refinery, was fully supported by the federal government and the Lagos state government over the past few years to become established with public resources? Why? And that was done despite the fact that you have 4 refineries that are public refineries. Why do you think that was it? So, and then the second question is that, why do you then expect that when a private refinery of the level and size of Dangote refinery is supported by government to become established, why do you then expect that the public refineries would ever work? If they have not worked even before now, how do you expect that they will now work now? Because if they start working now, if actually they are fully repaired, then they become competitive, with the Dangote refinery. And that becomes, a problem, given the kind of agreement that went into establishing private refinery, Dangote refinery. So we have to be clear about it. So far that Dangote refinery exists today, any hope that any of our public refineries will ever be operational is completely a delusion. Rather, they will continue to use those public refineries as a means to loot public resources and dangling it in the eyes of the people as if the government is doing anything. And that is part of the tragedy of this free market economy that we are practicing in, whereby a public resource that belongs to the entire country is turned into the hands of just a few people for them to make any much profit, and at the detriment of the Nigerian people. Look at what is happening with the food fuel price today. With the Iran-Israel war now, crude oil price in the world market is going up, which therefore means that corn price of fuel in Nigeria will also go up. Why should it be so? It is completely irrational because we produce this thing. Yeah. But on the logic of the free market economy, and with the Dangote refinery becoming the key refinery, operational refinery entity in this country, fuel price will never go down to a level that average Nigerians can be able to afford. And that is the entire tragedy of it. So I think that beyond just catching a few people, what we need to do in this country is a complete revolutionary overthrow of the existing status quo. We cannot continue like this. We need our oil and gas industry to be put back in the hands of the people. And it's not just the Nigerian people, also the Niger Delta people who are facing the full brunt of our production. And meanwhile, they are not even getting any benefit from it. Today now, corn price of fuel is higher in the Niger Delta than in the rest of the country. And they are the producers of these things. This kind of generational historical injustice cannot be allowed to continue anymore. And that is why arresting just one person, as far as I'm concerned, is scapegoatism. In the next 1 year, another scandal will break out again. That of the former minister of petroleum resources, Alice Madueke, is still there. It is a complete fraud. It's a systemic fraud, and it cannot be resolved so far the current system continues to exist.
Very, very true. It's so very important that you made some of this a fact, because one would ask and wonder, why should the Niger Delta region, which produces the fuel, have higher prices of PMS and all the products? And it's so very not fair, because lots of people would ask that. But don't you think that the leaders of sub-states, sub-sovereign states, could be blamed for some of these things? Don't you think governors of the South, of the South-South region have what it takes to change all of these things? Do you think they have the power to at least create or evolve a change with respect to their community?
See, on the surface they do. But in reality, this problem is not a federal government problem or a state government problem. It is a systemic problem. Those who are governors in the states and the people who are in the presidency or in the NNPC or the Ministry of Petroleum are the same people. They are the same people. So what is happening, therefore, is that the demarcation into federal states is only demarcates the access to the loot. It doesn't mean in any way, therefore, that the people who are in the states are any different from those at the federal level. In fact, the state governors sometimes are even worse, because those ones even do deals directly, with the oil majors, which means, therefore, that when there is oil spillage, the governors, instead of enforcing the rights of their people regarding the regulatory agencies to ensure that those villages that the oil majors are made, to clean them up, the governors just collect money from the oil majors and they forget about it. Look at what is going on now with the divestment, for instance. What has happened now over the past 1 year is that under President Bola Tinubu, all the 5 international oil companies that have despoiled the Niger Delta for the past 60 years have been allowed to leave the Niger Delta without paying compensation for all the environmental damages they have committed, all the devastation of people's lives they have committed, and while leaving all of their facilities not decommissioned in those communities where they have been operating for the past 60 years. That is what has happened over the past 1 year. And have you seen any governor, raising that at the level of the meetings they hold in Abuja? Have you had any governor publicly, raising those issues? It is only the communities and the NGOs and CSOs who are doing their best to try and advocate the issue. I know for a fact, for instance, that just last week, Friday, the kingdom of Ekpetiama, their case against Shell over the divestment He actually came up at the Federal High Court. It was the king of the community who had to enlist a lawyer to actually go to court to challenge that divestment process. The governors are not doing anything. The state house of assemblies are not doing anything. And this divestment process was done in complete violation of the Petroleum Industry Act. And the President Bola Tinubu actually played a role that showed his complete bias to the oil majors, apparently because he himself is directly linked to the oil industry. He was an accountant in Mopi prior to when he went into politics, and obviously his nephew owns what do you call it? An oil company. Ohando, which also is a beneficiary of the legal divestment. So when I say there is a systemic fraud,
are you still there?
Legal divestment process that violates the Petroleum Industry Act that was just signed into law just 4 years ago, and but an entire of something which means therefore that you are now, by virtue of the fact that is a relative is the president of Nigeria, is able to have access to a huge chunk of the public, of the oil resources of this country illegally. Corruption. Then what else are we saying? So we are not talking about that. We are not focusing about that. We are focused on solely a few millions. I'm not saying. I'm saying that the bigger have actually passed success. They only give us a few people as scapegoats to give the impression that the system is working, whereas the system has really been rigged against all of us.
Very, very bad. Truly, truly sad. And I truly do sympathize for these communities that are largely affected, not just by climate change alone, but equally from the activities of the oil majors that have contributed in the pollution of that particular community.
Let me add this. Let me add this from aloud.
Do, yeah.
President Bola Tinubu now is making serious efforts to restart crude oil production in Ogoni.
Yeah.
The whole idea of giving that very insulting state pardon to Kensaroriwa and the other 8 Ogoni activists who were murdered by the Abacha regime is an attempt to throw a carrot at the Ogoni headers in order for them to permit the resumption of crude oil production, which the people of that community have been rejecting since last year. At least the youth of the community, there have been at least a few meetings where the youth of the community rose up and said no. Because even up to now, the cleanup of Ogoni has not been concluded. Over 10 years ago, or thereabout, that is allegedly started. But yet, you want to resume crude oil production. And because of that, you say your government is pardoning somebody who did not commit any crime, because pardon indicates that a crime had been committed and the state has decided for whatever reason to then pardon that crime and forget about it. So when you pardon, it's an indication that a crime was initially committed. But Kensaroriwa did not commit any crime. Yokorina committed no crime. The Abacha regime, on behalf of Shell, robed them in a fake and false murder charge in order to get them out of the way for the oil majors. That was the first state murder in this country on behalf of the multinational company. And this happens everywhere where there are minerals, everywhere in Africa. They are doing it in DRC Congo. They are doing it in Kenya. Everywhere there is minerals in Africa, politicians, political leadership, and the states are killing their own citizens who decide to rise up against this resource exploitation. That was what happened with Ogoni 9. And President Bola Tinubu did not have the courage to recognize that an injustice was actually done to Kesorewa and co. Not by pardoning him, but actually by erasing that charge, first charge against him, and by apologizing on behalf of the federal government to his family, and by doing every other thing to rehabilitate his name posthumously. That is what Ogoni 9, that is what they deserve. But to tell you that President Bola Tinubu is in the service of the oil industry, that is why you had that state pardon. Because that state pardon helps to cover up the role of Shell and the role of the Abacha regime in the state murder of a Nigerian citizen. Now, what we're talking about now is that the Shell, both the Shell subsidiary in Nigeria and the in the pockets of the oil industry should be doing. But rather, what they are doing is to issue a false insulting state pardon and use that as a basis to get Ojogoni community to accept the result of oil production by entities that bought Shell assets. So Shell actually sold those assets in Ogoni to an indigenous company they call Renaissance Africa, which from our investigation is obviously a front for many politicians. So, in the real sense of the word, it's a cover-up that is going on. And it's very sad, but also not surprising, that President Bola Tinubu is the one pretending over all of this. So that is what we should be focusing on. There's a crime going on in this country, crime against the Ogoni people, against the Niger Delta people, against the Nigerian people. People don't understand the history of these issues. What is happening as far as I'm concerned with the NPCC people do? They go and catch Yahoo boys who have stolen some $100. Meanwhile, the real thief, the rogues, are quasi-legally or quasi-illegally robbing the entire country with impunity.
Very, very true, Mr. Soweto. You actually fleshing up that particular story because of, lots of people would say President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been a neoliberal leader from a very long time, even from being the Lagos State governor from 1999 to 2007. He has always practiced the new liberalism. So activists equally have stated that fact. And let's not forget, given what you have said, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is the substantive minister of petroleum resources. So, yes. Yes. He has all the powers in the world to do all of that. But of course, the fact remains, doing things the wrong way with good intention is not actually doing it right. That is the most important thing. Well, we would leave it at this particular point, just to let you know that Hassan Soweto would be here to take us on our main conversation. That is when we return. Ribadu, defense chief, warned poverty, food crisis, now national security threat. That in a bit is still Enterprise Morning. Please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Thank you so very much for being back. And if you just joined us, you're still on to Enterprise Morning, reaching you from Enterprise Television. Let's head to our main conversation for today. Hunger and poverty have become major national security threats in Nigeria, according to the National Security Advisor, Malam Nuhu Ribadu, and the Chief of Defense Staff General Christopher Musa. Speaking at the 14th National Security Seminar in Abuja, they stressed that food insecurity and economic hardship fuel violence, crime, and social unrest. The NSA noted that President Bola Tinubu's administration is tackling these issues through agricultural reforms, social investment programs, and enhanced security efforts. Tinubu at the event flagged off the deployment of 2,000 tractors under the Renewed Hope Agricultural Mechanization Program to boost food production across the country. General Musa, represented by Rear Admiral Ibrahim Shatima, highlighted that insecurity now stems not just from armed conflict but also from economic deprivation and dislocated communities. He pointed to disrupted farming activities, especially in Benue State, as a driver of inflation and displacement. He urged urgent investment in rural agriculture, youth engagement, and community vigilance, stressing that farming should be repositioned as a noble profession to counter rural-urban migration and food security. The Defense Minister Muhammad Abubakar and President Air Commodore Darlington Abdullahi retired echoed calls for a human-centered approach to national security. I still have with me Hassan Soweto. Thank you so very much, Mr. Soweto, for hanging around.
Yeah, you're welcome, sir.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me too?
Can hardly hear you here.
Oh, well.
All right, so we're trying to get things all sorted out. We still have Hassan Soweto. You can hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, beautiful. So let's get talking on this particular matter. Just yesterday, President Bola Tinubu launched over 200 tractors and so many other farming equipments and facilities and all that. But the truth of the matter is, how important are some of these things when we still do not have security for farmers who might use some of these implements?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. The first thing I'd like to say would be to commend the NSA for at least recognizing what many of us have been saying over the years, which is that the socio-economic crisis plaguing the country is inexorably linked with the rise in insecurity. That it has taken him this long to recognize that is quite sad, or at least it's good that finally somebody is able to make that connection. Because over time, the Nigerian government often takes insecurity and crime as something that is divorced from socioeconomic reality. Then the second point to quickly make is to also say that the administration of President Bola Tinubu actually needs to apologize to Nigerians, because with what the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization has said about a week ago, that Nigeria is now one of the notable hunger spots in the world. I think that confirms what we have been saying, that the net consequence of the neoliberal policy of subsidy removal, of naira devaluation, and others that President Tinubu embarked upon as soon as he came to power 2 years ago, that the net result will be hunger and hardship. As you know, myself and many other Nigerians, we have been marching consistently on the streets since early last year under the banner of enough is enough to hunger and hardship. That United Nations FAO pronouncement actually confirms what we have been saying, and it's an indictment on the Bola Tinubu administration for which the administration actually needs to issue a public apology to Nigerians. Because what has happened is that they have plunged the country into far greater hunger and hardship than it has ever experienced. That's the second thing I think I need to quickly spotlight before going fully into the conversation. Now, the president has announced a number of measures to begin to rebuild agriculture. And you are right to point out that how efficient can this be, given the fact that the areas where insecurity is most endemic in Nigeria today are actually the food basket of the nation, the Middle Belt region. Those are the areas where insecurity has become very endemic. Banditry, kidnapping, and all kinds of crimes. Many farmers are unable to go to their farms to plant. And even those who are able to go to their farms to plant during practices, sometimes they are not able to go back to harvest. Something which means, therefore, that Nigeria is actually losing tons of food crops every year as a result of insecurity. That's aside from the ones that cattle would trample upon and eat up. But the mere fact that many farmers do not have access to farmlands because of the raging security means that tons of food are being lost in this country annually. Something which could have helped at least to keep down food prices if farmers are able to access these farmlands. The other point, which also is linked to insecurity, is the flooding, the annual flooding that has become a recurrent decimal in this country. That also is having a big effect on the food prices, and it's directly connected. So that if all the government is able to just to provide fertilizers and equipment, if they don't address all of these issues, it's just like everything will just result into an exercise in futility. You have seen the flood that took place a few weeks ago in yes, exactly. In Mokwa, which leveled the entire community. That is in the news only because it's very devastating. What is not in the news is that there are many farmlands, even beyond that area, in the entire Middle Belt, that are regularly overrun by flood. Rice fields are devastated by flood. I mean, we have rice fields in Niger State and Co. that are overtaken by flood for weeks, which means that the rice stock will get rotten and all of that. And farmers are losing multiple of millions of naira, around all of this. Then there's also the question of transportation, which is also a key issue that is affecting food price. On the basis of the removal of fuel subsidy and the increase in the fuel price, transportation of food crops from the farms or the forests, the deep forests where these farms are located, to the cities has become a major issue. That value chain, if you don't address it, if government is not able to provide a means to reduce, at least for food crops, to subsidize transportation for food crops from the farmland to the city, there's no way the hunger crisis can be addressed. And that's why it's shocking too, that despite what this government said about the fact that they will use the money they save from subsidies to alleviate poverty, to build, to provide what they call CNG buses and co. Why are those CNG buses not be allocated, even to say, in every food producing state in this country, we want to allocate at least 10 CNG buses for farm settlements to bring their food crops to the city? Because if truly CNG buses are cheaper options, so it means that if you devote that to some farm settlements, you can ensure that the food crops that comes from those angles will arrive at the markets at a price that is far lower, than what is happening elsewhere, and that can begin to ascertain the effect. But those things are not being done, and that raises the question about all of this, whether or not any money has actually been saved, and whether if money were actually saved, they have not also been stolen. In fact, what should be talking today in Nigeria today is that after 2 years of fuel subsidy removal, and we have not seen any elevation of poverty through the so-called savings from fuel subsidy, there must be a probe of how these savings have been spent, including the portion that has gone to the different state governments. Because it's not just in the hands of the federal government that these savings, is deposited. They have also used some of these savings, according to them, to show up the FAC allocation to the state. So many states now are getting like 100% more than they were getting 2 years ago as FAC allocation because of subsidy removal. We need a special probe on this. Because if we are not seeing the effect, but one of the areas I thought could have seen the effect is even dedicated CNG buses and support, to farmers and to farm settlement. That is not happening. So that at the end of the day, you realize that it's not just the security that you are spotlighted as something that needs to be addressed. If the problem of hunger is to be, resolved, there are other, issues and areas that are equally to be addressed. You cannot address insecurity alone if you don't address the issue of transportation, if you don't address the issue of annual flooding, because even where you don't have a security region, the flooding alone itself, and this is not just a case with Nigeria alone, in many African countries today, climate change and flooding is one of the major reasons and factor behind food crisis and the hunger. It's just in Nigeria, security has now added to it to make it worse. So therefore, we need policy instruments that are cultivated and dedicated for the purpose of addressing all of these angles. And I think that what the NSA, or I don't know who said about having woman-centered security response, is also very vital in this. Because one of the things that NGOs, CSOs, including the likes of Amnesty International, have been saying for so long since the war against insurgency and co started, is that the Nigerian government and the military, are actually committing egregious human rights violations alongside this war insurgency. Something which means that sometimes communities and people who are caught up in the conflict areas actually are seriously dealt with. Sometimes they are killed, by the army, which also is affecting farming and agricultural pursuits, because it means that many people are running away, even from areas that should be deemed safe, because of how the military has been able to chase away the insurgents. But because the military operates in a fashion that doesn't clinically investigate and demarcate between normal people as well as the insurgents, we have had cases of, what you call extrajudicial killing of innocent people, which is also adding to people living, food producing areas, into the city in order to escape all of these crises. Unfortunately, the Nigerian army continues to accuse the Amnesty International of bias instead of responding appropriately, to all of these allegations that AI has made. So I hope that with this point that the NSA have just made, that they will now go and remove the ban, or because since 2 years ago now, the army and the police have been harassing Amnesty International, back to back. So I hope that the federal government now, will now go and ensure that the security chiefs recognize the important role that Amnesty International has been playing, and they will now be prepared to look at those reports that the organization has been putting forward, signposting all of the ways that the Nigerian military is getting it wrong. And they are going to now find a way to address these issues in order to ensure that the security response to insurgency does not harm the innocent and does not harm food production in the country.
Very, very true. You talked about a very important point there. You said the policy instruments that is very deficit in Nigeria. Come November 2025, world leaders would gather themselves in Brazil for the United Nations Climate Conference. That is COP30. I'd love to believe the President Bola Tinubu and his lieutenants will be there. We sincerely hope he won't go this time with 2,000 participants that have no business, that clearly have no business, going to Brazil. But do you think our leaders in Nigeria truly do understand what their mates go to the different COPs to go discuss? Because it's becoming evident that all they go there is to go fulfill all righteousness, tick the boxes, and come back home without results whatsoever.
Well, I even think that what we should be talking about is whether climate impacted countries in Africa and the global south should even bother going to COP. I think that's what we should really say. And that's not because of the pilgrimage that COP has become, especially for states like Nigeria, where they use it as an opportunity for politicians to earn extra code. But actually because COP is part of the architecture of the global capitalist order, of the so-called multilateral global order, whose inefficiency, whose bias, and whose complete impotence have been demonstrated over and over again. Don't forget that over the past 3 years, we have seen the impotence of the United Nations. We have seen the impotence just recently now of what do they call it? The non-nuclear proliferation treaty regarding the Iran and the Israel war. Yeah. We have seen the impotence of WHO when it comes to fighting diseases and when it comes to the lack of appropriate vaccines in Africa. We have seen that all these multilateral institutions are just there, what they call a go for show in Nigeria, to give the impression that there is democracy, everybody is at the table. But when push comes to shove, it becomes clear that only some big boys are actually the ones determining everything. We have seen that the global institution is broken when it comes to the debt, accretion in Africa through the World Bank and the IMF. And when it comes to COP, it has become an annual ritual that doesn't address the needs of climate impacted countries and communities.
Or is it
in
the
fact,
leaders?
what they are pushing at COP now?
Is it that the leaders of the global south, which Nigeria is amongst, are not really negotiating well? Because Nigeria is the largest, a country in Africa in terms of population. We should be at the head of the table and speaking truth. But when our leaders do not understand why they are there, don't you think that's the reason the global north would, of course, disdain the global south, which Nigeria is amongst?
Well, it's not just that alone. That is also there. Our leaders are completely ineffective on the global stage. In fact, they are often just very, very pathetic. And I'm not just talking about Nigerian leaders, African leaders as a whole. It's a shame, really, when you attend all these global institutions and their annual conferences. As an African person, you would be ashamed to call yourself an African because of the kind of representation that our leaders actually put forward at such levels. I mean, you have just had last year, in the aftermath of the protest in Kenya against the finance bill of President Ruto, how a finance minister in Kenya actually spoke about the kind of shameless way African finance ministers are treated by the IMF and World Bank anytime they go to seek for loan. I mean, I can't go into it, but there's a video made the rounds last year. It just shows that African leaders are treated like schoolboys because we often go cap in hands to beg for arms when actually, given our size, but also given the fact that the resources from Africa is actually what moves the entire world today. We ought to be assertive, defending our sovereignty, and actually demanding, justice for our people. I'm not just asking to sit at the table, but also putting up policies that we think are going to be beneficial to our people, and rejecting policies that are not going to be beneficial. That was the kind of representation that Africa's leaders, in the period before and after, independence, put forward on the global stage. Yeah. African leaders speaking at the United Nations were respected because they were often speaking from a point of vision. These were ideologically minded leaders who knew where they were going, who knew why they were in government. They may not even be socialists like people like us, but they were patriotic African people who would not allow anybody to ride roughshod over them. But today, where you're having the likes of Wike, and I hope that they will not sue me to call for defamation, but if it does, fine. But as far as I'm concerned, it's a representation of everything that is worse with capitalist leadership in this country. When you have the likes of Wike, at the ends of affairs, then exactly, what kind of representation that are you going to go into? That is on one part. The second part is that COP itself has actually become a COP of fossil fuel emitters, a COP of multinational companies, a capitalist COP whose interest is about managing the climate catastrophe in such a way that those which who are responsible for the catastrophe facing the planet today are not run out of business, and they continue to make their profits even while the climate emergency is being addressed. That has been the preoccupation of COP over the last few years, and that's why everything, most time when you are hearing from COP, is what they call what do they call this? The name escapes me now. Yes. But it's all. All kinds of policies that it's not about completely stopping emissions, stopping pollution. Not about that. It is about managing it. Whereas, given the temperature rise across the world today, we're actually facing a catastrophe. Every year since the past 4 or 5 years has been recorded, has been marked as the what is it called? As a year that recorded the highest temperature in the world. Every year is the past 5 years. I don't know whether they have recorded the one of this year. Most likely, the measure of the temperature change this year would also be higher than that of last year. So, which means that the world is actually eating up into catastrophe. But then to tell you that it is not just about the COP, as I've described it to be a COP of emitters and polluters, that is just a problem. Around the period when we had climate activists across the world are talking about completely eradicating fossil fuel production in whatever form, is when countries like Nigeria, for instance, are gearing up to continue, to produce crude oil and to produce gas. Gas flaring is still going on in Nigeria today. In fact, in Niger Delta today, the law has been done in such a way that you are allowed to flare gas so far you are prepared to pay a certain amount per a meter of the gas you are flaring to the federal government account. And the amount is so ridiculous that oil companies can easily pay that money to the federal government
and have their way.
Because it is actually cheaper to do that than to stop gas flaring. So which means that the federal government is actually encouraging gas flaring. It is at the same time that the world and the planet is refinery was established. That refinery is the biggest single train refinery and petrochemical company, I think, in the entire world.
Yes.
So if you build that kind of huge behemoth just 2 years ago or thereabout, that means that you intend to continue, to produce crude oil possibly over the next 3 or 4 decades. That is what it means. So which means that the people who are at the forefront of the climate challenge, who should be at the forefront of the effort to rid the planet of this, are actually the ones who are delaying the clock on this issue.
Yes,
so
because the reason why, yes, Mr. Soweto, the reason why I brought up the climate change issue is simply because how it affects our food production in the country. It has contributed, I do not know the statistics of the percentage which it has contributed to food insecurity, but let's maybe talk about the things we can control. That of the climate change, largely we might not control it as much as those in the global north, but the CDS, Chief of Defense Staff, Christopher Musa, just a couple of weeks back said, he gave an advice actually, that the nation, which is Nigeria, should fence its territory. We're talking about kilometers, so as to keep away the bad guys away from Nigeria that are causing the problem we have, which is affecting food security in the nation. Do you really think Christopher Musa understands what he is saying and the gravity of it?
Well, I mean, Christopher Musa may be a fine military officer. Be a professional, but I think that he needs to stop. He needs to stop talking to the press. Obvious that he has no understanding of the issues. That was not the only thing he said. He also was almost blaming Benue people for the attack that they experienced a few days back, in which over 200 people were massacred, saying that it was the community people who accommodated the assailant and all of that. I mean, if the CDS has an understanding of the size of this country, they will know that first to say you want to fence the country is complete badass. How do you even achieve that? And then there's a question of, if you fence, how do you man? Because just fencing, you know, as if you are going to fence it with a juju. That will now mean that once you now put that juju there, that is the fence. Nobody can go over it. People can still perforate the fence. People can still breach it. So
because even the United States, yes, because even the United States, with all the money they have and intelligence they have, their fencing, according to Donald Trump, is still not working, because immigrants still make their way to the U.S. So how much more?
Donald Trump did not even fence the entire U.S. Donald Trump could not even, despite how unpredictable that Donald Trump also is, he didn't propose to fence the entire U.S. They fenced the border with Mexico. That's what they did now. To fence the entire U.S. would be a crazy idea, something that Donald Trump himself was not capable of saying. But now we have a CDS in Nigeria talking about that. I mean, I just think that maybe he doesn't understand what he was saying, because it's not just about that. It's actually, up to now, crude oil pipeline are still being breached by oil brokers. You know, despite the fact that for over 60 years in this country, apart from the government providing security for oil installations, the oil majors themselves also provide on their own. So that when it comes to security, what you should be talking about is increasing manpower and equipment, and also utilizing new technology, artificial intelligence. I mean, a CDS that actually is a professional who is up to speed with the requirement of security discourse in the world today, ought to be talking about how can you deploy drone, for instance, around our borders, area surveillance and all of that. If you have 24-hour area surveillance using drone and other unmanned area objects, across our borders, 24 hours, and taking real-time surveillance of our borders. That would provide a more effective barrier to incursion than this idea of fence. Because again, like I said, if the fence is going to be built with cement and block, then actually what effective barrier can it hold for insurgents and for criminal elites?
Very, very true. We can't overstate some of these things because they are real truth. But unfortunately, we have an administration that puts the cart before the horse. As much as we congratulate President Bola Tinubu for providing farm implements and equipment, the truth of the matter is it is worthless if those equipment cannot be used in the farms by those who would use them because of the fear of going to their farm and accessing their farm and being met with bandits and lots of other people who have laid ransom as the only antidote to get their crops out of the farm and so on. So I would love to believe that the federal government should do the most important thing, provide security, ensure that our farms are safe, then bring the equipment which would ensure that there's food available for all Nigerians. Thank you so very much, Mr. Hassan Soweto, for being here. We truly do appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks. And just to let you know, people, Hassan Soweto is the National Coordinator, Education Right Campaign. That is just about the time we have. Thank you so very much for being here. Please do well to visit us. You can actually read up on everything we have said today when you see us at enterprisetvnews.com. You may equally rewatch this when you visit us at Enterprise TV7. I am Henry Igwebike. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye from us.
Welcome to Sport Tour on Enterprise TV, where we give you all the latest from what is happening in the world of sport. If you are joining us for the first time, please do well to follow us across our social media platforms at Enterprise TV 7. My name is John Olasikomi. Join me and let's ride together. Here are the highlights. Starting with local football, Genk awaits offers for Super Eagles striker Arokodare, says Coach Flink. Enadozie shines as Super Falcons hold Portugal in thrilling draw. Away from local story, let's move straight to foreign football. In the Club World Cup, Lionel Messi set up PSG reunion with Inter Miami as Atletico Madrid bow out of Club World Cup. In other sports, Toby Amuson set for Golden Spike meet in Ostrava. In the world of tennis, Osaka Azarenka advanced on grass at Bad Homburg. Now let's feed you with the details, starting with local footballer. Genk head coach Tosin Fink has provided an update on Tolu Arokodare's future. Arokodare is a man in demand after a stellar campaign for the Belgian Pro League outfit. The Nigerian international finished the top scorer in the league with 21 goals and 5 assists in 40 appearances. Bundesliga giants, the Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund reportedly have interest in the player. The clubs in the Premier League and Turkey have also been linked with a move for the striker. Fink has, however, confirmed that they are yet to receive any offer for the 24-year-old. Away from the camp of the Super Eagles, let's move straight to the camp of the Super Falcons. Nigeria Super Falcons battled host Portugal to a barren draw in the 2024 WAFCON warm-up friendly in Lisbon on Monday evening. The nighttime African champions, however, failed to raise their games to the quality that treated the football world at the FIFA Women's World Cup in Australia last year. Although they were fortunate not to be beaten by the host, Super Falcons suffered a huge turnover as they lost possession cheaply, relied more on the individual brilliance of captain Rasheedat Ajibade and goalkeeper Chiamaka Inadozie and quick counters to keep up with Portugal. Right from the first half, Inadozie kept Nigeria in the game with a couple of saves. The former Paris FC save hands continued their heroics after the break, making successful saves in the 52nd and 54th minutes after Portugal pushed for an opening goal. Interestingly, against the run of play, Nigeria saw an audacious effort come off the crossbar in the 79 minutes with the Portugal goalkeeper completely beaten. The result extends the Super Falcons' unbeaten run in 2024 and gives Madugu more to ponder ahead of the team's next friendly against Ghana's Black Queens on June 29 in Morocco. Away from local football, let's move straight to foreign football. In the Club World Cup, Paris Saint-Germain beat City Sounders to advance to the last 16 of the Club World Cup, but Atletico Madrid bowed out despite a late 1-0 win over Botafogo. The European champions went into their final Group B match at risk of elimination following a shock loss to the Brazilian side. But goals from Kvaratskhelia and Achraf Hakimi proved enough to top the group. Atletico struggled to assert themselves against Botafogo with keeper Jan Oblak forced into good saves to deny Jefferson Savarino and Igor Jesus. Griezmann found the net in the 87th minute when he swept home Julian Alvarez's low cross from the left, but it was not enough. And Botafogo will face Palmeiras at the next stage after the Brazilian side 2-2 draw with Inter Miami. Miami came close to finishing top of Group B after goals from Tadeo Allende and Luis Suarez put the MLS side up 2-0. But their hopes were dashed in a matter of minutes as Paulinho and Mauricio struck in the 88th and 87th minutes. Away from foreign football, let's move straight to Euro sports. World record holder Tobias Musa is set to go full throttle at two major events in Ostrava, Czech Republic and Lucerne, Switzerland in the coming days. Musa, who showed a glimpse of her record-breaking capabilities at the recent meet in Jamaica, where she breezed to a winning time of 12.57 seconds. Season best will be among the stars to parade at the Golden Spikes meet in Ostrava. The Golden Spikes meet is a World Athletics Continental Tour Gold meeting, which means it is one of the highest level track and field meets in the world. Musa will be looking to improve on her season best time as she comes up against heavyweights such as Olympic champion Jasmine Camacho Quinn, former world champion Nia Ali, and US sensation Tia Jones as the Ostrava meets. Musa has attracted global attention wherever she raises since coming off a strong performance at World Athletics Championships in Oregon, where she won, gold in a wind-assisted time of 12.06 seconds. She also set a new record of 12.12 seconds in the semi-finals of that meet. Away from athletics, let's move straight to the world of tennis. Former world number one Naomi Osaka and Victoria Azarenka both advanced to the second round in the Wimbledon warm-up tournament at Bad Homburg on Monday. Japan's Osaka battled past Serbian qualifier Olga Danilovic 7-6, 7-6 as Belarusian Azarenka beat Germany's Laura 6-2, 6-2. Azarenka 35 next meet Poland's Iga Swiatek in the second round. Osaka fired 16 aces with Danilovic hitting 10 in a big serving battle which lasted just over 2 hours. Croatian Dona Vekic lost to Diana in last year's Bad Homburg final, but she reserved that result on Monday. Vekic saved all 4 break points she faced to sweep past the 6th-seeded Russian 6-3, 6-3. She next placed Czech Linda Noskova, who beat Australian Alja Tomljanovic 6-3, 6-2. That is how much I can take on Sport Tour on Enterprise TV 7. If you are here to follow us across all social media, endeavor to do that. We are at Enterprise TV 7 across all social media platforms. Visit our website at enterprisetvnews.com and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. My name remains John Olasukomi. Thanks for watching.
Enterprise TV, a tradition of truth.